Our first speaker, Professor Noah Novogrodsky, exemplifies the success of an English major. After completing degrees in English, and I must confess, political science as well, and those were at Swarthmore College, he went on to earn an MPhil at Cambridge University in England, and then a JD at Yale University. And while it's clear that Noah was always interested in the world beyond America, it was at Yale Law School that international human rights and the laws surrounding them became the focus of his interest and activity. As a student, he co-chaired the Cambodia Genocide Justice Project and team-taught a course on mass crimes against human rights. After law school and clerking for a district judge in Boston, Noah was awarded the prestigious Bernstein Fellowship in International Human Rights, which took him to Eritrea, Ethiopia, and South Africa to study the refugee problems remaining from the Eritrean War of Independence. Today, Professor Novogrodsky is an expert in international human rights law, migration, and immigration. He has studied the impact of HIV/AIDS in Africa and global health law. He's investigated human rights abuses, been involved in the prosecution of Cambodia's Khmer Rouge, and has worked on refugees and refugee flows, asylum cases, and mass expulsions. At UW, Noah teaches courses in international human rights law, immigration law, and transitional justice, and of course that, every faculty member has to have a bread and butter course, so his is civil procedure. He is also the co-director of UW's Center for International Human Rights Law, where he leads students who assist in the prosecution of human rights crimes at selected locations around the world. But today, Professor Noah Novogrodsky will speak about something a little bit closer to home, in fact, right here in Jackson, in his talk, An Economy That Works, Measuring Immigrant Contributions to Teton County. Noah.
I'm honored to be invited back to Saturday U, almost exactly 2 years after I was here, to talk about, in 2015, refugee resettlement, comprehensive immigration reform, and deferred action for the parents of American citizens. Think about how much has changed in the last 2 years. Most of you said nice things about that talk, but as I walked out into the lobby, one gentleman said, loud enough to his friend, loud enough for me to hear, "Smart kid, but why does he have to be so damn political?" Turns out I'm not the only one who's political about immigration. This is a divisive topic, and one that reasonable people can disagree about and unreasonable people will seek to exploit. I got 2 emails this week in my inbox that I think are reflective of the tenor of the immigration debate and what is at stake when we talk about immigration. FAIR is an organization that seeks to crack down on illegal immigration and has a very pro-Trump administration perspective on enforcement and an analysis, which I generally disagree with, about what immigration's impact is on the economy. Other economists have a very different view of immigration and rush to release a study claiming that there is no link between immigration and increased crime, which, as you know, is part of the current debate and dialogue around this contentious subject. At a time when immigration lawyers are camped out in the waiting area of our nation's airports, when the Trump administration has stepped up immigration enforcement, when ICE agents proudly tell the New York Times that they feel unshackled and freed to do their job, we are in desperate need for common ground on this most divisive of subjects. And I believe there is one area where we might develop a consensus. fashioning a sensible immigration system that meets the needs of US-based businesses, promotes innovation and entrepreneurship, and supports the immigrants whose labor drives our economy. I'm a law professor and, as Paul said so kindly, the co-director of the University of Wyoming's Center for International Human Rights Law and Advocacy. Our center has joined forces with a New York-based nonprofit called the Partnership for a New American Economy. There are a lot of Fortune 500 companies that have banded together to form PNAE, the Partnership for a New American Economy. And together, we are drafting a report on the contributions of immigrants to the Teton County economy. So our partner organization is a large New York entity with statisticians and economists and political analysts. They have all the data on immigration. I'm about to share some of it with you. We are a part of the University of Wyoming College of Law, and we are trying to find the real human story that goes along with the statistical picture and put it together in a report that will provide an evidence-based account of the contributions of immigrants to the Teton County economy. We do have an agenda, and so I'll just lay it out here. I am pro-business and pro-immigrant, and I am also pro-rule of law. And so that means that sometimes these interests come into conflict, and I believe that we can have a debate about many aspects of immigration law and policy, but you should know where I'm coming from, and I think it's better to just put my cards on the table. As you know better than I, Teton County boasts a unique economy within Wyoming, and immigrants are an important and growing part of the community. Our goal is to measure the impact of immigrants on the local economy, to recognize the essential role that the foreign-born population plays in the world of business, and to promote an honest conversation about labor, immigration, and what makes for a thriving economy. The Partnership for a New American Economy promotes laws and policies that seek to grow the economy in a certain way. They were big backers as an organization of comprehensive immigration reform, a grand bargain on immigration reform. That effort has largely stalled in Congress. It certainly did under the Obama administration. It failed under the Bush administration. It's conceivable that President Trump will have a Nixon goes to China moment on immigration, but I'll leave it for you to speculate on whether that is possible or likely. PNAE seeks to promote opportunities for skilled workers to enter and stay in the U.S. legally. It urges comprehensive immigration reform. It wants to develop immigration policies that promote the needs of U.S. businesses, and it seeks to strengthen federal, state, and local initiatives that serve the interests of immigrants in our community. Think two groups: tech startups in Silicon Valley and meat packers in Omaha, not unionized auto workers in Youngstown, Ohio. PNAE has conducted a number of economic impact studies of the role of immigrants in large and medium-sized cities. I have selected 3 of them for us to talk about today. One comes from Des Moines, where the PNAE study demonstrated that immigrants contribute more than $3 billion to the greater Des Moines GDP. Let me say that again, $3 billion to the Des Moines economy. When we talk about immigrants, though, we are talking about different categories of people. Many immigrants are US citizens, such as myself, right? Other immigrants are lawful permanent residents. Still others are here on temporary visas, and there is approximately 11 to 12 million undocumented illegal immigrants in the country. So these statistics represent an aggregation of all of these different groups of immigrants. In Denver, PNEE's report demonstrated that foreign-born households contribute $673 million in taxes to the state and local budgets. In Salt Lake City, foreign investors have created 24,000 jobs for the local economy. I hope by this point in the presentation you are seeing where PNEE is coming from. It is a Chamber of Commerce type entity that promotes the immigration of less and more skilled immigrants to contribute to our economy. So what about Wyoming? Immigrants are a small percentage of the population in the state, but a higher percentage of the population in Teton County. I want to pose the Tina Turner question. What's law got to do with it? I'm dating myself with that. My students have no idea what I'm talking about. The answer is that the Immigration and Nationality Act sorts everyone who enters our country into categories. Undocumented or illegal immigrants, temporary visitors, and by the way, temporary visitors who overstay their visas are illegal immigrants. I use the term undocumented or illegal immigrants. I reject the term illegals. I don't think we are defined as human beings by our immigration status. And many of us, at different times in our lives, will be legal or illegal in a given country. Right? But the day after a work visa expires, a highly skilled worker employed for 6 figures at a company is in the exact same legal position as somebody who waded across the Rio Grande. We also have green card holders. In the world of immigration law, we call these lawful permanent residents. And after a waiting period, lawful permanent residents can become US citizens. But legality is not exactly an on-off switch. There are many different statuses. And our law sorts us into these statuses. And I think it is worth noting that in the category of undocumented immigrants alone, that community earned $140 million in wages in 2014. All of the statistics that I am sharing with you today are from 2014. But there has not been a mass exodus of the immigrant population to Teton County, and my guess is that that figure is higher in 2016 than it was in 2014. How does PNEE gather these statistics? I think that's an important question, and we should reveal our methodology. PNEE crunches publicly available data. We know that there are 23,437 immigrant residents in the state of Wyoming. We know that that represents 4% of the population. We know that immigrants paid total taxes of $107 million. Because we don't have a state income tax, those would be federal taxes, they would be local or sales tax, state and various transfer taxes and real estate taxes. My bet is that that figure vastly undercounts the contributions of immigrants to our economy. Why? Because many undocumented immigrants are working on a false Social Security number. That means that they are paying into Social Security and have no prospect of taking out from Social Security. Most economists have pegged that number at roughly $12 billion a year. $12 billion is keeping our Social Security system afloat, right? Economists have also argued that if we were able to bring more of the illegal immigrant population into the formal economy, we would be able to maintain Social Security's solvency for an additional 50 years, and right now it's on path, I believe it's going to run out of, it's not going to be in the black by 2020. So there are many ways to fix Social Security, but bringing more people who are paying into the system would be one of them. Those statistics are hard to capture according to PNAE's data or numbers crunching. So we know, for example, that $140 million was formally paid to undocumented immigrants in the form of wages, because we can track how money gets paid, but we don't know how money is paid under the table, what the informal economy looks like, or what the contributions are to a multi-trillion-dollar system like Social Security when undocumented immigrants pay into it using somebody else's Social Security number. We know that immigrants spent $449 million, that there are at least 647 immigrant entrepreneurs, generally small businesses. And when I say immigrant share ranking, that means that there are 435 House or districts in the country, and that Wyoming ranks relatively close to the bottom, in the bottom quartile of, in terms of numbers of immigrants and their contribution to the economy. But that is changing, and it's changing rapidly. A couple of slides here, and I will make all of this material publicly available to the Wyoming Humanities Council and others if you want to if you can't sleep at night and you want to dig into a thick data set, it's better than Ambien, it's better than red wine, and it will reveal that PNAE is a serious statistical group looking at population indices, economic indicators, tax contributions, labor market conditions, educational levels, and levels of naturalization and citizenship. PNAE engages in this enterprise because the impact of immigrants is different in different parts of the country. So some cities, PNAE has done a terrific study of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's, anybody know what Pittsburgh's biggest employer is these days?
University of Pittsburgh Medical Center.
Absolutely, right? It is not steel, right? Pittsburgh has a flourish, it is like the hospital industrial network. A very high percentage of skilled doctors, technicians, and others are foreign-born in the Pittsburgh economy. So one of the things that the PNAE study for Pittsburgh does is examine the way that the largest industry is driven by immigrant labor, ingenuity, and advances. The University of Wyoming has a healthy percentage of foreign students, but we are lower than many institutions in bigger cities with larger immigrant populations. Who knows about the value of immigrants to the economy? The HR department of corporations. They rely on the contributions of skilled immigrants. We educate smart, talented, driven people from all over the world, and we have bottlenecks in our system because we don't make it easy for graduates of our great colleges and universities to stay in the country and work in their chosen fields. So our H-1B visa system, which I will get to, is stuck and it is limited, and people in both the agricultural and high-tech sectors are chafing under visa requirements. They're actually different visas for different kinds of workers, but everybody in this world knows that the system is not working smoothly. And one of the things that PNAE wants to do is provide data and evidence to show exactly how much we benefit and what we are losing by failing to reform our system. PNAE gathers statistics on language and also on real estate values, and I suspect that might be of interest to people in Teton County. With all of this in mind, why is PNAE interested in low population, affluent Teton County? The answer is it's not because you have terrific skiing, although our partners in New York keep asking, when they can come out here to do some on-the-ground research, and I think they would like it to be between January and March, or on August 21st for the eclipse. For one thing, Wyoming is a non-border state with traditionally low unemployment. So it should be possible to talk about the contributions of immigrants free of the claim that immigrants are stealing our jobs or overwhelming local schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. That may be true in other parts of the country, but it is patently false as to Wyoming. And how do we know this? Because Al Simpson in 1986 championed the last successful immigration reform. And he told everybody who would listen that Wyoming was a great place to lead on this issue. Why? Because you don't have out-of-work factory employees or workers putting enormous political pressure to enact trade regulations or restrictions that would keep out foreign workers. We do not have a border which is growing increasingly militarized like you have in Arizona. I have spoken to school superintendents and hospital administrators in border states, and they have a hard time knowing how many kids are going to enroll in their school district in a given year, or how to budget for their hospital system, given that many immigrants are afraid to go to the hospital until they are desperately in need of assistance. And we simply do not have those dynamics in Wyoming, which makes us a fertile place for an honest conversation about immigrants and immigration. But the main reason PNAE is interested in Teton County is that this place features 4 distinct groups of immigrants all contributing to the economy. And we are framing our study, and we are in the middle of doing research on it, to focus on these 4 groups. So let me identify them, and I will share a little bit of our preliminary understandings and findings, and then we can open it up to questions and answers. So the first group are service sector workers, mainly in the tourism, construction, and hospitality industries. I don't need to tell you how important foreign-born workers are, immigrants are, to the local economy when it comes to tourism and hospitality. Other counties in Wyoming wish they had the tourism revenue and proceeds from businesses and sales tax generation potential that Teton County has. The second group that we're studying are pretty unique to Teton County, although there's also some in Park County, which is foreign student workers who complete their study and then get a real Social Security number and work authorization for a short period of time. Again, I'm learning from all of you that we have large numbers or significant numbers of Eastern European workers, of Asian workers, of South American workers, not only in the parks but around town. And I hope I'm not saying anything out of order here. These workers are legal for their first job, which means that they get a valid Social Security number, and their employers are generally checking that Social Security number and lawfully hiring them to fill short-term jobs. If you were had finished your studies and were from, I don't know, Moldova or Russia or Poland, and you had a job and you liked it as much as I do in Jackson, you might be tempted to stay. And your employer, needing your labor, might be tempted to keep hiring you. That is to say, not continually checking your employment status and duration of your visa. Right? You might marry an American citizen and adjust your status. You might find that there were changed country conditions in your country of origin, and you would have to claim asylum because it's unsafe for you to go home for fear of persecution. Or you might simply keep working without authorization, which renders you illegal. Right? So there's a range of human realities. Our point is that we want to study the J-1 visa recipients and figure out what contributions that important community is making to the local economy. The third group of people that we are focused on are small business owners. There are many immigrant entrepreneurs. Generally, small business owners have legal status. I don't know of too many folks who are undocumented and decide, I'm going to invest in the community and take on a risky venture. And the fourth group, almost exclusively unique to Teton County, although there are substantial numbers of them in and around Sheridan and the Bighorn Basin as well, are foreign investors, generally in real estate and luxury housing. The Human Rights Center's role in all of this, so the University of Wyoming office that I am a co-director of, is to conduct interviews with employers, employees, entrepreneurs, and investors to get a sense of the real picture and to add flavor and a human narrative to PNAE's statistical account. The stories we gather are confidential, but will allow us to draw a richer picture of immigrant contributions to Teton County and have an informed debate. some of what we are finding is obvious. For immigrants especially, housing costs in Teton County are out of control. The off-season, which I understand is, like mid-November, is dead for some work. Immigrants are hardworking and lifting families out of poverty in Teton County, but we are finding that their financial and legal situation is precarious. Since November 8th, the fear being expressed by immigrants in all communities, including in Wyoming, is palpable, and not only among undocumented people. Let me say that again. The fear is real, and it's not limited to people who are here illegally. We are seeing thriving immigrant-owned businesses, restaurants, bars, landscaping, and cleaning businesses whose employees are afraid to go to work. We're asking questions like what is working and what's not working? What issues are unique to immigrants? Do foreign-born members of our community face discrimination in access to credit? What are they doing for driver's licenses? Are they making use of social services? Do legal residents feel comfortable leaving the country and returning? The anecdotal evidence is no. Right? If you have a green card and you are from some parts of the world, you're not feeling very good about leaving the United States and trying to get back in, getting back home to your family or to your job. If your job, as one of my clients explained to me recently, is to promote engineering contracts in the oil and gas business internationally, but you come from, say, one of the 7 affected countries under the executive order, it's hard to do your job because your job is to generate business and to be a consultant and to share your knowledge and expertise all over the world. And if you can't get back home, or if there's a risk that you can't get back home, that's bad for business. In the category of foreign students, we are finding that don't ask, don't tell tends to predominate. Right? Approximately 40% of undocumented workers in the country are people who overstay their visas. One reason for this is the time restriction on how long one can work and stay in the US on the particular type of visa. One thing you should be aware of is that family members who apply for a visa to accompany, say, an H-1B, an H-2A or H-2B visa holder, these are visas in the agricultural sector, are not permitted to work here while they're on a visa. We have a double standard. So if you're here on an H-1B visa, which is a highly skilled professional visa, your spouse or partner can work, but not if you are here as an agricultural worker. This creates an incentive for people to overstay and live in the US without documentation. Employers, many of whom dislike the complicated regulations and red tape that are required to sponsor workers' temporary work visas, often tacitly support such actions by their employees, especially because undocumented workers are less expensive and less trouble than legal workers. Undocumented workers can also be exploited with fewer repercussions because as a country, we do a poor job of enforcing workplace rights, particularly for undocumented workers. Among foreign investors, we have noted the irony that Jose Antonio Vargas pointed out in his comments in Jackson last year, another event sponsored by the Wyoming Humanities Council, that it is legal for undocumented people to be an employer, but it is illegal for them to be an employee. Why is this? because we have full contract and property rights that are independent of our immigration status. So a wealthy, undocumented foreigner can overstay a tourist visa, become an investor in an enterprise, and start employing an awful lot of Americans, and still be subject to an immigration raid. Right? Now, if you have $1 million to invest, you can also hire an immigration lawyer and apply for certain investor class visas. But lots of people don't do this. They come here for various reasons. They are successful, they come into money, they make money, they innovate, they work hard, and at that point, they can hire other people, but they can't be hired themselves. How strange is that? Jackson is an attractive place for wealthy people from all over the world to invest. I was skiing on Thursday with my friend Tat, and as we were getting close to the rendezvous lodge, a bald eagle flew over us. You can't put a price tag on that, right? So those chalets next to the mountain in Teton Village are expensive, but if I was independently wealthy, I'd be buying there. Yesterday at lunch, I went to the new Lotus Cafe. I had a Bombay bowl that was so tasty it brought tears to my eyes. If I had $5 million to invest, I'd be eating a lot of Bombay bowls. Jackson is attractive to foreign investors who want to park their money in a place that they might like to spend part of the year, right? Or all of the year. Well, not mid-November, that's what I'm learning. This is a great town, 311 days a year, right? As most of you know, after the New York Times article last year, there is now a replica Jackson village in China. The question is, how do we manage that investment and growth and profit as a community from all that makes Teton County attractive to foreign investors? On this topic, I would recommend that Wyoming not do what British Columbia has done, which is introduce a 15% real estate tax that targets foreign buyers but not locals. Everybody knows what that's about in Canada. There's a perception that wealthy Chinese are buying up too much property that native-born Canadians can't afford for their children to live in their community, and so this punitive tax has been imposed to try to discourage foreign-born investment, read Chinese investment, in the real estate market because local people can't afford to buy there. I understand the impulse to create a community where your children can afford to live, and if you're fortunate enough to have property and got in at an affordable time, you certainly want to make that your family's homestead and opportunity for the future. But a racist, discriminatory tax on foreigners that is really sort of thinly veiled prejudice against one class of buyers is probably unconstitutional here and not the way to go about doing it. When the study is complete in the summer, we hope to share it with local, state, and federal officials. And we expect to use the report to advocate for pro-business and pro-immigrant laws and policies. Teton County isn't perfect, but you have a lot to be proud of. To the employers in the room, thank you for making Jackson a place where immigrants want to work and live. To the immigrant entrepreneurs and small business owners, We hope our study reflects the many contributions you have made to the state and economy. To the immigrant workers here, this study hopes to honor your hard work, backbreaking work, and all that you bring to our communities. To the children of immigrants, we know that you are going to school, you're working multiple jobs, you're dealing with parents and grandparents who have unrealistic, the students I talk to call them insane expectations for them, making it in a bicultural world. And they are still graduating in the top 10% of Jackson High. I want those students to come to the University of Wyoming, regardless of immigration status. And finally, to lawmakers, there are 6 Nobel Prize winners in the United States this year. All 6 of them are immigrants. You know what to do. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Well, just to move beyond Teton County
Yes,
for
sir.
a second, and with your knowledge of the impact of the current immigration laws, what would be the main tenets of a new immigration legal system that you would propose?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think there would be 3 components to it. One, we would be compassionate towards the most vulnerable people in the world, asylum seekers and refugees. I think what Justin Trudeau is doing in Canada is outright admirable. And I think we can all learn from how wealthy advanced societies can extend freedom and opportunity to vulnerable populations. Number 2, I would look for a way for the illegal immigrant population to earn status here. And so I use the word earn advisedly. There are, yes, people knowingly entered the country illegally. And yes, they broke the law in so doing. And yes, they jumped the queue. But it is unrealistic to think that we can deport 11 to 12 million people. And if we do so, we are going to be deporting a lot of US citizens because the children of undocumented folks are US citizens. I don't want to live in a country that looks like that, right? And so how do people earn it? They earn it by contributing to our society with work, by paying back taxes, and by not having a criminal record. There's one group of people who I do not think are deserving of staying in the country if they have entered illegally, and these are violent criminals. So I think on this there is broad consensus. Everyone should know that crime against undocumented immigrants is underreported, and particularly in the area of domestic violence. So I am all in favor of creating reforms that would allow for victims of domestic violence to come forward and feel safe testifying against their attackers. And I've talked about this with many people in the room, but we have some possibilities, legal possibilities, but the crime is underreported, and lots of, especially women and children, are damaged because of the under-enforcement of a certain type of crime. And the third thing I would do is reform our H-1B and H-2A and other sort of work visa-based system. I suspect that Republicans and Democrats could come to agreement and compromise on the business visa model issue. It's the question of refugees and the undocumented population that is harder to reach consensus or agreement or compromise on. When President Trump said he wanted to move to a merit-based system, I partly agree with that. We have an immigration system that privileges family unification. It's a 19th century model, and so a U.S. citizen's cousin from a foreign country often has a higher priority because they don't have to get in line for one of these scarce visas for entering the country. I think we could probably come to sensible business needs-driven reforms on those types of work visas, but that is avoiding the more contentious questions.
So you mentioned earning status, but you didn't say what status.
Right.
Is there some way of compromising the question of whether they get to vote or not? In other words, if you make them legal with a work permit that they can't vote, the Republicans would probably accept it. But the Democrats would say, no, they must be able to vote. Is there some way of compromising that dilemma?
That's a great question. But I think I disagree with your premise. I think what we're talking about are different statuses. And so, for example, the Dreamers, the children who came here as children who are undocumented, have a current status known as DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That is a valid Social Security number and authorization to work, join the military, or go to school. And it is a 2-year promise in exchange for a $400 and something filing fee that it's not a full adjustment of status, but it's a promise not to be deported. I think that's an important in-between step. But what you don't want to create is a class or caste of people in the country who are allowed to work here indefinitely but could never adjust their status to become fuller members of the political community. So our current system has temporary visa status. It then can adjust to green card holder status or lawful permanent residency. And then from that, we can apply for U.S. citizenship. There are only 3 things that you can't do if you are not a citizen, but you are a green card holder. Number 1, vote. Number 2, serve on a jury. And number 3, run for office. I think it would be problematic to expand what are called guest worker visas in other contexts that provide limited employment opportunities, but no chance for pursuing the American dream or becoming a fuller member of society. That said, we don't necessarily need to keep the same time limits on adjustment of status. So I would be in favor of bringing many more people into the economy and then perhaps pausing before deciding when and how they become permanent residents. I'm sorry, before they become U.S. citizens.
You told us that Al Simpson described Wyoming as a great place for immigration. One reason being that there's no factory workers or displaced workers to put pressure on them. Do you think that displaced poll workers could feel that pressure and potentially apply that pressure against the provisions in Wyoming?
That's a great question, but I don't know the answer to it. I don't get the sense that coal workers are losing their jobs because immigrants are suddenly working at these bankrupt firms. I mean, jobs are shrinking in the coal sector, and I think the bigger question is, what are the retraining and alternative employment opportunities for affected workers or displaced workers, not competition for those jobs that are not, in Wyoming, we generally do not have competition for a single position, and it's not a zero-sum game. It's a great thought, but I would imagine that if we could start to diversify our economy, that a lot of that diversification is going to come from immigrant ingenuity and contributions. And so that rather than seeing us in competition for suddenly unemployed or displaced coal workers, perhaps we can grow the pie and diversify the economy with the help of Wyomingites and others.
Let me start by saying I support your position, but if I was the opposition, I would pose the question, are you cherry-picking Teton County as a unique case study just because it supports your position, and can you apply the same things to the rest of the United States? Small agricultural communities, Phoenix, San Diego,
Right.
LA?
Guilty as charged. Yeah, I am cherry-picking because I expect this to be a unique and in some ways a friendly place to have this particular conversation. But it's also an accurate reflection of the local economy. Wyoming has two big participants in the immigrant economy that are not present in Teton County. The agricultural sector and the energy sector employs lots of science, technology, engineering, and math graduates from other countries. And the agricultural interests and the energy interests are pretty good at lobbying for what they need. Teton County is this interesting mix. We just simply do not have J1 visa holders in the numbers that you have in Teton County elsewhere in the state. And so you're right to say that we're partnering with an organization that has a message and a bias, and it maps on conveniently to Teton County. But I think it is appropriate to provide an accurate picture of what's happening here so that it can enter the debate. And it's going to be different than the agricultural or industrial conversation elsewhere. Sure.
I'm just curious, if you've ever worked in a restaurant, lodge, or kitchen, and if so, when, where, and how long?
I have not personally worked. Say more about that question.
I think there's references in your statistics to what a incredible component of this issue is the hospitality industry. And I think when you are employed in that world, there are certain realities and conditions and experiences that are extremely visceral that help inform your perception of this issue.
I think that's a very fair comment. Do we have time for one more question, Paul?
Canada has a merit-based system in large part, as I understand it. And so if you're advocating going to a merit-based system, what would be the key components of priority that you would see as in the best interest of the country as a whole? And then, just as another component, would you expand the total limit on a number of people that would be allowed into the country under a revised system?
Canada has a more merit-based system, but it's not a pure merit-based system. But it has an explicit point-based system that privileges certain things, including the ability to speak French or English, and you get a certain number of points. But Canada is competing for global talent, and in some areas beating the US for that talent. And I think we can learn from the system. I think we could reform from a family-based sponsorship system to more of a merit-based system. But there are a couple of groups that are left out of that, and we should just be aware of that. One are less skilled workers, and we do have an important agricultural and hospitality sector in the country. That is not a big part of the Canadian system, and because we are a different economy, we should be aware of that. And second, a lot of people who come on H-1B visas eventually become lawful permanent residents and then US citizens are the most meritorious of a business-oriented system, and then they want to sponsor their mothers or their relatives to come. Those people are excluded under a strict merit-based system, and query whether we can really attract the global talent we want if we eliminate some of, if grandma can't live with her grandchildren in the same house as the superstar performer immigrant who has made it here, then we're going to have problems attracting the people we want to under the purely merit-based system. It's a great question, and thank you all for your time and interest.